Welcome back. It's still the conversation on Morning Spring, and we have been discussing on the verdict given by the Supreme Court for local governments to have their monies given to them directly from the federal government, and also for the order also saying that the state governors cannot dissolve elected local government chairmen and appoint caretaker committees in charge of the local government. We have been discussing with Dr. Misbau Lateef, who has been giving us legal perspectives and interpretation of this judgment. Dr. Lateef, thank you so much for staying with us.
My pleasure. Thank you too.
All right, so let's just move further with this judgment now. The Pan-Yoruba Socio-Political Group, Afenifere, has condemned this judgment. They called it judicial conspiracy, and they say it is against true federalism. They also accused President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of wanting to run a unitary system of government with this judgment from the Supreme Court. Their argument is that the local government system is an exclusive preserve of the states, either by direct constitutional provisions or residual powers in the federation. Do you agree with their stance?
Well, I totally disagree with them, and I think I've made some point earlier to actually speak to that. You see, people in this period, I've seen quite a number of uninformed, opinions, and I say this with this respect. Now, in the academic circle, we say the father of federalism is a famous, a professor called K.C. Ware. Now, K.C. Ware defines a federal system as a system whereby you have a federal government and then you have the federating unit. But you see, we run a constitutional democracy. Nigerian Constitution, Section 7 specifically recognizes the local government as another arm of government. 2, Section 162 recognizes that the distribution of public revenue shall extend to the state, the federal government, and then the local government. Now, if you put all of this together, you will realize that the system of local government in Nigeria is part of our federal structure. And as I've mentioned earlier, even in other federations, like you can research this as journalists. I mean, in other federations like India, like the United States of America, like Canada, like Australia, they do have system of local government where the federal government directly allocate resources to them. This happened particularly in the US. So the idea that when you interact with the local government as a federal government, you are distorting federalism, or you are trying to usurp power, or you are trying to impose a unitary system can only be incorrect. Incorrect because, like I've said earlier, the Constitution supports what we have now. The practices in other federations support what we have now. I think what people should do instead is to tell us how exactly can we redress the mischief of our governors that has persisted over 2 decades now. Governors have refused to allow the local government in the manner of speech to breathe. I'm just giving you a specific example earlier of my own local government. 250 million, 300 million, on average every month, and then the local government gets only 10 million. Is that what the constitution anticipates? The answer is no. So basically, I think people who are on the other side are just trying to confuse the argument by being too theoretical. If you are too theoretical about idea of federalism, yes, you argue that, well, a federal system anticipates only 2 arms of government. But that is not what our own constitution says. That is not what we have in our own law. So as a constitutional democracy, we need to follow what our constitution says. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court has done. I think people should get enlightened and update their knowledge rather than, I would say with due respect to them, sharing ignorance up and down. There is nothing unconstitutional. There is nothing underhand in what the Supreme Court has done. I've not read the judgment, as I said, but on the face value, they have only interpreted what our constitution says. And everything they have done, as I said earlier, is consistent with practices in other federations like Nigeria. At any rate, laws are made for human beings and not the other way around. So if there are laws that are not Okay?
Thank you. Before Femi comes in. Now, this judgment, help me out. It takes immediate effect. This
Yes.
means that states who do not have democratically elected local government will not collect their FAC allocation for the local government for this month if they do not have democratically elected local governments. That means the federal government will withhold their allocation. Is that right?
Yes, let me say, legally speaking, the federal government will have the power to withhold their local government allocations. But I don't really foresee that happening,
How?
particularly at a time like this when there is so much hunger and poverty and all of that in the land. Because if the government does that, I foresee that escalating what is already a bad situation. And this is where, again, politics comes in. I was going to say earlier that the laws are made for human beings, not the other way around. So it is the law that you will bend to actually suit the purpose of human being. You don't bend the human, in the manner of speech. So the point is, I don't know what federal government will do. I'm not privy to their plans, but I suspect that they might want to give the state governor, I would say, some transition period so that they don't create maybe another. If a local government doesn't get allocation for this month, for example, what it means is that the staff, the personnel, and every other thing will suffer for it. And I guess that will, further impoverish our people. So as much as the federal government is banned to comply with that law immediately, I mean, it comes into effect actually immediately. I foresee a political, I would say, attitude toward maybe allowing the governor maybe 1 or 2 months, to I would say, I would say to just comply. But if they go ahead and withhold the money, if they can summon the political will to do that, and then again, damn the economic consequences, well, they will not have done anything wrong. They will be right to do so, but I suspect they may not want to do so. I expect some states, like my Osho, for example, where they don't have, elected official, I expect them to still receive the allocation for this month. I expect states like Ogun State and other states like that, to still, I don't know. But then, like I said, I wouldn't really know what the federal government would do.
Yeah.
So, but I think they should act in a way that is not against the law. So, and as a lawyer, I think if they go ahead to withhold the fund, of course, I will not be able to say they have done anything wrong. But politically, that may not be correct, for this particular month. The judgment came, in the middle of a month. So I guess maybe from next month, I don't know.
All right, quickly, and it's good that we are talking about these now because many state governments have what that arrangement that they call caretaker chairman in various local governments in their domains. Because the law is the law, you have just said it as well. It has no regard of any persons. One is the law, and of course, the Supreme Court, being the court of policy, its judgment is the law as well. Just something similar, because I was going to say to conduct an election in Nigeria about the law, even if it's a local government election, there should be a number of days that will be given as notice by the organizing body in that particular state. Now that we have these, I think it's 90 days or thereabout, I'm not too sure.
180 days or so.
180 days, sure. That's almost 6 months. So how do we navigate these? But then we don't want to preempt the federal government. You've given us what they might want to do. There is the position of the law, and there might be a political arrangement to that. But let me take us back a bit.
Okay.
A couple of questions now. Oyo State Governor is the vice chairman of Governors Forum in Nigeria, and he was speaking to journalists recently. He said, and he was talking about this judgment. He said, they said there is a judgment of the Supreme Court on local government autonomy. I think it's just a distraction. This was the way he described it. We must face the real issue that we have. The issue that we have is that we are not producing enough. We are not productive. Maybe it may be part of the problem. That's the LGA autonomy. We want to have value for what is being shared. That's the federal allocations. But our problem is productivity. He went further to say, how much are those local government areas generating within their domains? Can they survive without handouts from Abuja? Handout from Abuja, is that the way to go? Is it sustainable? How do you react to Governor Makinde's comment?
Okay, I think that comment, with due respect, respect to Governor Makinde was quite unfortunate. I actually saw that video and I was like, what is he saying? For me, that was quite one, it was quite I mean, the remarks, regarding a Supreme Court judgment should have been more, I would say, respectful and not dismissive in the manner Dr. Makinde, Governor Makinde has done that. So that's be that as it may, I think it reeks of somebody who is already in a panic mode, somebody who is already probably frustrated, or disappointed too. Some governors, including Governor Makinde himself, are among those whose hands are in the cookie jar. And when you remove their hand now, okay, when they ask some of those questions, for example, that how much does a local government make? The question is that how much of the local government fund does he, as a governor in Oyo State, release to the local government? So why don't we just allow them to have their resources first? Meanwhile, if you look at section 162 sub 6, that section actually, and when it says, and I want you to actually read that section, please, once you have the time. Now, we've always talked about joint account. That section at the closing says that this joint account anticipates two types of funding: the allocation from the federal government and then the allocation from the state government. So meaning that the local government are primarily required to be funded by the federal government and the state government. What we have seen over the years is that rather than the state government putting down funds to actually support the local government, what they have always done is to spend the local government fund on behalf of the local government. So I think Governor Makinde was just, I guess it was just reacting out of panic.
All right.
And I guess
Doctor,
he's disappointed that the judgment did not turn to sustain what they have always done, all of them.
All right.
To, I would say, kill governance at the grassroots.
Dr. Lateef, two quick questions because we are pressed for time. Number one is this: many persons, in fact, have described it in some quarters. I say, is this a trap, for different chairmen who possibly are not used to accountability? Because the moment you are responsible for whatever you are getting now, then you can be picked up by the ICPC or the EFCC, and then people will hold you more responsible. Are you sure it is not a trap for them? These are some concerns of some persons, number one. And number two, who holds them responsible? We know the situation of the involvement of the ICPC, EFCC, but how do we hold them responsible? And you know what I'm saying? Because so many state governments have been accused of being reckless. They do what they want. And because of the power that they have, now that the local governments have the powers, the chairman there, they can do as they like according to the law. How do we get them to be responsible with the people's, patrimony, really? That's number one. And number two, there have been calls for restructure through federalism. This judgment of the Supreme Court, the case filed by the federal government through the AGF, and with what we have now, is it part of restructuring that we are talking about, or is it just there? Two questions.
On the first one, I think the people themselves at the local government will have to be very vigilant. They have to ask questions. They have to follow the money. And they can now follow the money because the money has been returned to the communities. So they can track down the local government chairman. Rather than filing up at the doorstep of the governor every day, they can always now go to the local government houses, family houses, within their communities. So that is first one, the people themselves. You see, we can't have good governance if the people are not up and doing, if they don't ask questions, if they are not their neighbor's keeper. On the second hand, the EFCC can now exercise direct control over, they've always done that anyway. I think what they have got now is an enhanced capacity. But now that federal government allocations go straight to the local government, and they can pursue the local government chairman directly. So really, it could be a trap for those of them who want to go rogue, who want to be irresponsible. But for anyone who wants to really make a good name for himself and his family, I think this decision has given a platform for people to showcase their capacity and probably promote themselves from grassroots to to the state level and then to the federal level. If you are able to showcase good governance at your local government, that should ordinarily pave way for you to rise higher in politics. On the second one, which is restructuring, well, for me, really, I think yes, this is also in furtherance of the restructuring move, in the sense that we now have, or we will now have an effective or efficient local government system, which, as I said earlier, we encourage people to participate in politics. There has been too much attention at the state level, which has rendered the governor too powerful. There has been too much attention at the Abuja, which has rendered the president also too powerful. Now, for me, giving the local government their money is a way of also devolving power, because with resources goes power. Now that they have resources at their own beck and call, then the power has also been devolved to people at the community. The king, for example, are entitled to 5% of local government allocation. The governors hardly give them. But now a king in a community can easily call his chairman, because they need those funds also for security and all of that. So for me, I think this is also in furtherance of restructuring, in the sense that it also devolves power and resources to the grassroots.
All right, we have just less than 2 minutes to go, so I would appreciate if you can, answer this question in a minute. The current FAC revenue sharing formula gives the federal government, allocates 52.68% to the federal government, 26.72% to the states, and 20.60% to local governments. And there are people that believe that the federal government, going on with this suit to the Supreme Court and within this case, is playing to the gallery. They believe that the federal government is like a father who feeds fat on balanced diet meal, but the child feeds only on probably carbohydrate alone. Then accuses the child of not growing as he should, because he's feeding the child, but he is feeding on balanced diet. 52.6%. There are people who think the federal government should eat less and allow the state and the local governments to eat more, because these are the tiers of the government that are closer to the people. What do you say? Recently we hear the announcement of a new Ministry of Livestock Development and all. The federal government still wants to eat fat and feed fat, and are saying that the 20.60% to 774 local governments is enough to feed the people.
I think I agree with the people who maintain that position, and I think that is consistent with what some of us have argued over the years. We call it fiscal federalism. That, you see, we won't have a proper or true federalism until states and local government have control over their resources. So we have too much concentration of resources in the hand of the federal government. And if I'm to propose a figure, I would say the federal government should have only 30% of the share, and then the 70 should go to the state and the local government, because the people, the real activities, they take place at the grassroots, the state and then the local government. So yes, federal government has been feeding too fat on our national patrimony, as people say, and I think it is high time that this particular government also, takes another step, to make sure, it is high time they took another step to make sure that they devolve more resources to the states. They devolve more resources to the local government. You cannot give them power without empowerment. And the empowerment here is to give them more resources to perform their duty. Federal government does not have a duty, or should not have a duty, on some of the activities that they undertake these days. The livestock, for example, should ideally be a role for the state, or was a local government. So federal government should shed weight and shed resources, and I think that is consistent with practice in other federations.
All right, thank you so very much, Dr. Misbau Lateef. We appreciate your time, your take, your insight on this particular conversation. Dr. Misbau Lateef is a lawyer, an analyst, and a law lecturer at the University of Hull, the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, my pleasure. Have a good morning.
You too.
You too.
All right, Femi, that's the conversation. And, with that last question, it's high time the federal government allowed the state and the local governments to have balanced meal,
Yeah.
so that they are closer to the people.
That was quite an analogy you made.
Yeah, they are closer to the people. They do
Right.
not need to eat more. It's like a father eating 5 meats and you're giving no meat, no egg to your child, and you want him or her to grow
Or you're telling two of them to share one.
accordingly.
Yeah.
You don't need the meat anymore.
Oh, okay, all right.
How many meats do you eat, Femi?
I think that's a fair place to put it. And in the words of Dr. Misbau said, the federal government needs to shed weight, give it to the people that has to do with the structure. That's the state and the local government. Fair enough. And by the way, trust us to stay on this matter. And this will be the size of the program for today. Thank you. You could have a recap of this program on our YouTube channel, even on our Facebook channel page as well at Western Spring Television. Femi Ojo is my name. God bless Nigeria. We will see you tomorrow, God willing.
And I am Evelyn Ohiolei. Stay tuned for Spring Trends coming right after this broadcast.